Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me here for this lesson. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about things that you can do as a manager to help create and support successful teams. First thing we're going to talk about here is resources. And I want you to imagine that you're trying to build a hockey team. You're trying to build a highly successful professional team, one that could potentially win the Stanley Cup, and you're looking to get all the best players you can get. So you go out and you spend a lot of money on getting a good coach, and you get two great defenders, a great goalie, and a couple of really good forwards. Okay, this is a team that should be highly competitive, very difficult to beat, but you spend a lot of money on players and the coaches, so you decide to save some money and you don't provide the players with hockey sticks. Now, once they get out on the ice, what's going to happen? It's going to be a total disaster because without hockey sticks, it's going to be very difficult to score goals. Okay, and this sounds really ridiculous and silly, but we do this type of thing in organizations all the time. So I want you to think about what happens when you put together a really good team in your organization, but you provide them with a really poor internet connection. Or maybe you give them printers that don't work consistently, or they don't have the software they need to communicate or to do their job, or there's just not the administrative support that they need there to perform as well. Now, this all sounds like really silly stuff to do, and my youngest daughter walked in as I was making this video, and she asked what I was doing, and she looked at the previous slide, and then she looked at these bullet points, and she said, well, when you don't give them those things, Dad, that's kind of like not giving hockey players hockey sticks. Exactly. We can put together the best team that has the best people on it, people who are positioned very well to coordinate and very good at what they do. But if we don't provide them with the resources that they need to get the job done, they are not going to be able to perform at a high level, and your team's performance is going to suffer. Next, we're going to talk about leadership and structure. And in this situation, you can see we've got 10 different people here over in the bottom corner. And I want you to imagine that as we look at these people, the blue people are really good at programming, the green people are good communicators, the gray people are good critical thinkers, and the yellow person has good leadership skills. Okay. Now, in this type of situation, we may end up building some cross-functional teams where one person with each skill set is in each group, and then the person with strong leadership skills kind of coordinates them. We may decide to build more functional teams where we have a group of programmers, a group of critical thinkers, problem solvers, and a group of people who focus on communication for the organization. Based upon the information we have here, there's not one right or wrong way to do this, but what we do know is that we do need to organize our teams and provide them with a clear structure and clear leadership. This helps them understand what work needs to be done, how the work is going to be done, and who is going to make decisions about how that work gets done. Next, we're going to move forward to trust and building a trusting environment. And I want you to think of trust as your willingness to be vulnerable. And this isn't necessarily vulnerability in terms of your willingness to do a trust fall and put yourself in a situation of potential physical harm, or your willingness to share a secret that could cause emotional harm. But I want you to think about this in the workplace. And in the workplace, we become vulnerable when we allow other people to do work that we're going to be held accountable for. Okay, so maybe we have a team here of 6 people, and if this team is going to be highly successful, there's going to be trust across all these people. And you can see all the different relationships where we need to have trust in order for this team to be operating at its maximum capabilities. But what often happens in organizations is we don't have quite all these relationships of trust. Instead, we get little breakdowns. And what you see in this situation here is that we have a group of 3 people who each trust each other, but they don't necessarily trust everybody else. And over here, we have another group of 3 who seems to each trust each other, but they don't necessarily trust everybody else on their team. And when this happens, what ends up emerging within the organizations are different factions or coalitions who actually don't necessarily all work together, but the different coalitions who are depicted here within the green circles, they actually can work against each other to a certain degree. And this can be very damaging to team performance. So it's very important that we work to make sure that we do build all these trusting connections within our teams. Next, we're going to talk about evaluations and rewards within our teams. So I want you to imagine that we have this sales team that you see here on the bottom, and we've provided them with a series of individual rewards. Now, in this case, we're going to start with an example where one of the salespeople offers something to a client for $5,400, but when the client is looking for the salesperson to make the deal, that particular salesperson is not available. They get somebody else, and that person, rather than supporting their teammate, actually competes with them and tries to take the sale from them because they're all working off individual rewards. Now, conversely, we may introduce some collective rewards. And if we have some collective rewards where people are rewarded for team performance, in this situation, when that call comes in, the salesperson who takes that call might be more likely to look at how they can support their coworker or their teammate. Now we're going to move on to team member abilities. And team member abilities are important because to have a high-performing team, we need to have high-performing team members. Now the news media loves to focus on stories where we have sports teams in particular who win championships, but the sports teams aren't known for having a lot of great players. They just have really good communication and really good teamwork. And the example that I've used here, we're looking at the 2004 Detroit Pistons, who were a group of players who were somewhat unknown at the time, and they went up and they beat the Los Angeles Lakers, who had 4 future Hall of Famers on them. They had Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal, Karl Malone, and Gary Payton. And nobody thought the Pistons could beat the Lakers, but the Pistons were known for being hardworking, playing tough defense, and having good communication, and they went out there and they won the championship. So when these types of stories come up, organizational behavior scholars often look at them as being more the exception than the norm. I'm going to offer a different explanation here. The explanation I'm going to offer is that these are all really good players. To play at a high level, like a professional sports level like the National Basketball Association, you have to have high individual capabilities. Now, they may not have been the highest of all players out there, but they were still very, very capable individuals. And they just happen to have a better combination of individual capabilities and team coordination that year than any other team. Okay? Now, to support that point, I want you to think about outside of sports, and let's move more into business and maybe into business that is supported by science and technology. It's highly unlikely that you're going to open up the newspaper one day and see a headline that reads, "Group of idiots creates flying car." And the reason for that is that when we have scientific breakthroughs, the teams that are working on these tend to be highly performing scientists, people who are very intelligent. And the takeaway I want you to get here is that good teams require good team members. Now, as we move forward here, there is a relationship between the team and its leader as far as abilities are concerned as well. So in this example here, we've got a team where there's moderate intelligence amongst all the team members, but their leader is someone who's high on intelligence. Now, in this type of situation, what is highly likely to happen is that the leader is going to use their intelligence to help coordinate the people within the team. There's going to be learning that takes place, and it's going to improve the performance of the team. So this is a situation where we don't necessarily have all the highest abilities on our team, but we're still able to perform at a high level. Now, conversely, if we have highly intelligent members of our team, but our leader is low or moderate on the intelligence scale, then what we're going to have happen is our leader is actually going to stifle the creativity and the productivity of the team, and it's going to be damaging to team performance. So it's very important that your leader's abilities match up with the team or exceed those of the team members. Moving forward, we're going to talk about personality, and there's a lot of different aspects of personality that we can talk about with teams, and we're going to just touch on conscientiousness here. We're going to imagine a team where we have a mix of highly conscientious people and low conscientious people. And in this case, maybe they've turned in some type of paper or report, and the people who are low on conscientiousness think that everything looks great, but the people who are high on conscientiousness aren't comfortable at all with the quality of what's been produced. They express their concerns, and the people who are low on conscientiousness, essentially say, yeah, but this is good enough. And what that leads to is it leads to some frustration for the highly conscientious people, and rather than driving the group to a higher level that they would be capable of if they had a team full of conscientious people, they simply withdraw and give up. So this is an example of how having a diversity of personalities here isn't necessarily the best thing, because we're not capitalizing on the aspects of highly conscientious workers. In this situation, we may be better to have a team that is of highly conscientious workers than another team of people who aren't quite as conscientious, so that we can capitalize on the abilities of different team members. All right, next we're going to talk about roles, and we're going to go back to our hockey example. And in this example, we had gotten some defenders, a goalie, and then some offensive players. But imagine that instead of doing that, we just went out and got the 6 best goalies that we could get. Now, that would obviously not be our best approach to winning a championship because we need people who can perform different roles on the ice. Similarly, in business, we need the same thing. Okay, different team members should fill different roles, and members can serve more than one role. So, for example, you can be creative and insightful. We don't necessarily need one person to be creative and one person to be insightful. People can fill a variety of roles there. Another topic that comes up often when we talk about teams is diversity in culture. And this is a very complex, complicated issue to discuss. There is a lot of conflicting literature, conflicting research on this topic, and breaking this down would really be a lesson in and of itself. So the one takeaway that I want you to think about here is that there are some benefits to diversity in teams, and they are best realized when there is good leadership. So if you have a very diverse team, it is highly critical that you have a good leader. All right, next we're going to talk about team size here. And while there's not always a perfect team size because your team size is going to vary by what the team is trying to accomplish, generally speaking, we tend to think of an optimal team size as being 5 to 9 people, okay? But you do want to use the smallest team that you can. And the reasons for that are that that's going to help reduce your coordination issues, and it's also going to minimize social loafing that takes place. Now, sometimes we have work groups that are larger than the actual team sizes that we need. And when we do have these large work groups, one of the things that we can do is we can kind of break up these large work groups into subgroups that perform as separate teams for different functions. And finally, we're going to close with employee preferences. And what I'm going to cover here is I'm going to just introduce something that I call the Batman rule. Okay? And Batman rule is pretty simple. Batman is pretty awesome, okay, but he's not always the best team player. Batman works very well individually. He doesn't like to be told what to do by other members of a team. He can from time to time partner with the Justice League or partner with Superman. Occasionally he has a sidekick, but Batman typically works best alone. Now, would you rather not have Batman or allow him to work alone? You'd typically want Batman on your side, right? So don't try to force Batman to work in a group where he's not going to be successful. Let him do his thing. Same thing with your employees. Sometimes you're going to have a really awesome employee who's just not a great team member. And when that happens, you don't want to force that person to be part of teams. You want to find a way to let that person be successful in what they do the way they do it, and then find people who are good team members to be part of the teams that you need to build within your organization. And that is the Batman rule, and this is building successful teams. Thanks for joining me, and we'll talk to you soon.